invite filmmakers to the museum to discuss their films. And tonight we have a very distinct variation on that process. It's a great pleasure to welcome this evening Mr. and Mrs. Orin Raphael. Their collection, of course, of less kinetic, slightly more static, in some cases, in many cases, art is currently, as you know, on exhibition in Gallery D upstairs. And it seemed to me appropriate to schedule a screening of some of the films that the Raphaels had selected during the period when that exhibition was up there. And I have imposed, and it certainly is that, on Mrs. Raphael, to say just a word about these films, and I will be frank with you about the process of collecting films, because I think most people have never, the thought of collecting films has never even entered their mind. And yet when you stop and think about it, it makes all the sense in the world. You can't see a film normally unless somebody puts it up on a screen somewhere. They're inaccessible except when somebody else makes them available. And it's very often at the mercy of exhibitors of all sorts to be able to see things, unless, of course, you own the book. And then you can see it at will. And there are, in fact, a number of people across this country who collect films of a variety of natures that meet their particular interests and inclinations. I am particularly interested myself in this collection of films because of the connections that it quite apparently has with the exhibition upstairs. The fact, for example, that there is the Cornell film, Rose Hogarth, that we'll be looking at this evening, and the Cornell box that runs the sand fountain upstairs. And also, of course, the films of Maya Deren, which were made in this country in the 40s, right at that moment when people began to take film as a serious, expressive art form with a good deal of interest. So that it seems to me that the films correspond very closely in many ways with those objects upstairs. So, with that introduction then, and with great thanks to coming formally in a way that's not possible today, to speak with us very informally about these films. I'm going to welcome you. Thank you. The schedule will be as follows. We'll look at that first reel of films. There are 6 short films together on one reel. We'll look at those, and then we'll turn the lights up a bit, and we can talk a bit about those films and also about the Cornell film, which we'll look at after that. But let's look first at that first reel of the short pre-World War I magic films. Federated would love to answer questions or thoughts or comments you have on I like that a lot, but I should take first.
You got these from Cornell directly?
Yes. Children grew up in Nyack, New York, and watched film companies at the theater, filmmaking films, and had a part of the lifelong social film. And a terrific thing. I feel funny talking to this audience. I know talking to those who are thinking more about these films than I do. But you probably know he was a real fan. Kind who would have started fan clubs had he not been joining or whatever. He really is a vocal admirer of many stars. For all sorts of different reasons. Some but he loves films in general, and many of his classes are about film. And these are just things that he managed to pick up from second-hand shops, bookshops, wherever they wound up because of his value. And finally, he was doing a little business on the side of selling these films. He was always annoyed because the modern museum didn't buy them and offered to accept them as a gift. But told each other people like us who just thought they were wonderful films and that it would become happen. And we have enjoyed them very much over the years. Our own children grew up seeing there's obvious Christmas film, games and stuff, but enjoying all of them and all the children that kids and us food. And children do love them. They do really, there's no need to understand and the whole idea of using this the movie camera as an instrument of magic.
Did you ever look at the films with him? I'm curious what he might say about them.
No, we exchanged philosophies and said, and probably said useful things like who made those films that are not known. I don't know if he told me having a story in we talked about things like we enjoyed and sure and different people, the cloth table that lamps and baskets following each other and following like ducks. He told me before that the magician in the mysterious box is Mellius himself, and he apparently appears in I don't know. I think Joseph knew a lot about this himself. If he told me about it, I would get more. I'm embarrassed. Of course, these are scripts that we make much more recent. And although we've always been warned to be very careful about preserving films, we've never done anything special. They have enough dried out, shriveled stuff. So it tells them to have a little bit. But my golly, we've never for about 30 years. And we just had when we came. I thought maybe our face is usually a dance, that helps. I don't know what to really describe. Treatment is for preserving films, but whatever it is, that's good for me. We just said they had short.
Then film will shrink gradually. The ideal conditions is 50% humidity and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's
basement.
That's your wine cellar or whatever.
Leaky stuff.
Black and white will last quite a while. Color film disintegrate. The color. Any other thoughts or questions on these films early? Before we go on to the yes. Not really. In fact, we're talking about this at dinner time. There's a filmmaker who's also a sculptor and sculptor named Robert Greer. And you may be familiar with his work. A few years ago at Three Rivers, he did 3 large moving sculptures. They must have been 7 or 8 feet high. And they were just simple white pyramids. And they sat in the Westinghouse Plaza. They sort of occupied a certain space. I can't remember whether it was 2 or 3 of them. But there they sat, demarcating this space, except that they didn't actually. They were moving very, very slowly. And so somebody would be standing there, visibly occupied with a photographic exhibition or whatever, and they would suddenly discover that this thing crept up on them. And would then run into things and had a switch that would turn directions. And those things, those objects patrolled the Westinghouse Plaza for 9 or 10 days. And Greer tells a story, in fact, about one of those in the UN Plaza that got away. They had railroad tie barricades they would hit and change direction. One got past one, got on the elevator. And the point is, Greer has a set of these objects that have a kind of life of their own, which is that quality, especially of the Cole films. The last Leo Cole who did those line animation films also did the automatic films. And Greer's own films incorporate a lot of that into and marvel. And there are even parts in his films that are direct, clear homages. So it is a thread that has Cindy survived and reared his. He made a film called Man and His Dog Out for Air, which was a line film, about 3 minutes long, which he made very clear on. A film we haven't liked. So the next film then doesn't have a title on it. It's been variously called. I don't know, it doesn't tell you the key message of this film. Did you give it a name? In any case, the film begins with a scene of people watching this play. It's also referred to as Rose Hobart, which is the name of the woman who is the central protagonist in these films. And the program doesn't explain it's a film which is compiled from little snippets, bits and pieces, of a feature-length film called East of Cornell, and a very melodramatic tale. And he completely changed it. He recommended with it first of all, a piece of colored glass, which would give it is a black and white film. But he recommended colored glass that would give it a kind of tint. There are 3 shades of blue glass. And I was experimenting with those this afternoon, and I couldn't get a position for those that didn't knock the image way out of focus. And so I think that what we'll do is look at it, and it's slightly off glass, slightly brownish black. I think it's much clearer what's going on. But the prints that he later made were actually printed in the lab with slightly bluish, reddish blue tint. It was also his practice to play a record, the name of which I forgot. Rumbo Rhapsody. And it's not particularly synchronized. He simply recommended that one play that. And I made a tape, not a record, but from a different print of the film. And I'll simply turn the tape on when we start the film so that we will have with it the soundtrack, which is not intended to be directly synchronized, which in any case would have played, and then there would be the pause and the band. So we have that track on tape, and I'll just include that. Filmed everywhere, capital E. So the film material itself is taken from a feature-length film, East of Borneo, and I have no idea where East of Borneo was filmed, but I would presume it would be in the Los Angeles area. It's very much an early 30s feature-length film.
And of course, the watching the eclipse part would have been from probably a newsreel, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
around the turn of the century.
Yeah, the eclipse footage and that slow motion pool of water into which that mysterious object is dropped. That's not in the
No. In Candle, there I think there are quite a few things that have been added to perform as the heavy forces of nature or whatever that are moving. The heavenly bodies, the celestial movie stars around.
Is this print, which print you got from 30 years ago? Is this the same as the one that was printed here before?
I don't see any differences except in the color itself, because that print, the print we showed last fall, was very recently made, and the tint was tinted according to his instructions. It was a fresh new print that had the color in it. But outside of the tint, and maybe a couple of very minimal differences, I don't think it's identical, isn't it? I think that the eclipse sequence at the beginning of the print that's being circulated for Renner was actually shorter than that. I think it's maybe missing a few feet at the beginning.
I always be curious if you did anything to it in 4 years.
I don't know. How much reworking did he do with it?
I doubt if he did any, once this was ready to be given to the public, so to speak, I doubt if he changed it at all. When once the thing, he had the master print made and prints made of it, I think he'd have hesitated to change it, and I think he wouldn't have put it on the market, so to speak, unless he felt it was a finished work. Incidentally, that red and blue stuff, they did it in movie houses all the time. I don't know whether it was prescribed by the movie maker or not, but I remember seeing films where maybe a few other people here, who can remember films where in the fire scene, everything went red, and in the more romantic night scenes, everything was dark blue.
Yeah, those are very hard to... Somebody asked earlier about the life of print, so the life of color of black and white prints is much longer than color prints. But what has survived is our black and white printing sources for the most part, and the color print, the tinted, the chemically treated print, where the color was added after the photography, has mostly been worn out, disappeared. But there are some that survive, and some prints that are in circulation are actually now have that coloring printed into them. So they still circulate. We showed it occasionally. Yeah. Bob?
You met Cornell through your gallery when you were in Pittsburgh or when you were in New York?
Well, I went to New York one time with a couple of friends and to the Peggy Guggenheim Gallery, and we found, kind of behind a screen pushed off in the corner, a Cornell box, which is still one of my favorites, which Miss Guggenheim now owns in Venice, a house that you can pay to go through. And we saw it, we got very excited about it, and finally she came back to see what we were doing behind that screen. And said, "Oh, do you like this?" And seemed rather surprised that, first of all, that we noticed it, and then that we were really very excited about it. So she got out a couple of other things of his, and I started asking him about him, and said I would love to have a show of his work. And he responded most generously. He had one show at the Julian Levy Gallery in this country, and he'd been working a long time. He was not a young man then. Such a shy and retiring man. He's just so thrilled that somebody was interested in his work at all. And I guess most of the things that he did came through the Peggy Guggenheim Gallery, but he must have supplied some out of his basement too. And we started corresponding, and then I often visited him when I went to New York. And he was a very, he liked people who liked his work naturally. But he was a lonely man. He didn't have many people that he was very comfortable with. I suppose somebody who, I think maybe it was easier for him to get along with somebody who wasn't sort of threatening to him of the art world in New York. He was enormously impressed by and intimidated by people in the art world, because that was how he was trying to make his living, and they always just fate in their hands.
In Pittsburgh?
Yes. There's a reunion here tonight. People who've seen these films a long time ago.
Could you say something about that gallery operation? Because
Yes, it was before you were born. I just had finished school and wanted to come back here to live, and as far as I knew, there wasn't any interest in modern, not just visual arts, but modern anything in Pittsburgh that would be evident. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, I thought, well, if there were a central place where one might see films or hear, even find books of modern poetry or anything of that sort, maybe it would bring people out, because you couldn't imagine that a city the size of Pittsburgh at that time wouldn't have had some people who had such interest. And indeed there were. There must have been 2-3 dozen, maybe 100. And it was like a very strange underground club or something. It was also interesting to me at the time that people most involved in the arts, in painting and music and so on, were not the ones who were most aware of the modern movement, or whatever you want to call it today. It's quaint to call it modern now. At any rate, I had figured it to work sort of like the Museum of Modern Art, which opened when I was in New York at school. And people, that did not support itself by selling paintings. Key to the whole operation. One paid an admission to go in, and you paid to see the films, and you paid for lectures and so on. Well, I found out that in Pittsburgh, after 3 weeks, I realized that if we were going to try to make people pay to come through the door, no one would come through. And so we dropped the idea of an admission just to see the paintings and the exhibition. But the thing that helped to support it really were the films. There was only one theater that showed what they then called art films, and they did it only occasionally. And there just wasn't a whole lot going on here. I mean, you could be a first with anything. Tennessee Williams played and other far-out things like that. And let's see, it lasted until 1948. And at that time, one either should have become a serious gallery operator or quit. And this had not been an enormous success, needless to say. By that time, I was married, had one child, another on the way. Seemed like a good time to turn over the field of others.
This was the gallery in the playhouse? The old
Yeah, it was there for a while. It was downtown for a year, and then it was in the upstairs of the playhouse for about 6.5 years, and then back downtown for another year after the war was over. The war years were not probably a great time to be trying to do something like that anyway.
Maya Deren showed her films at this gallery. Is that true?
Yes, and that was the first, I'm pretty sure it was the first showing outside of New York. And there again, these people were not that known or accepted even in New York. Maya had paid for her own premiere at a theater in the village by renting it. And it was certainly a turnout for it. And there were people interested, but it was very exciting to them to find anybody, any stranger, anybody from outside their immediate circle in New York who was interested in their work very often. And I don't know that Maya and Joseph knew each other, but generally it was a rather small little group. Marcel Duchamp was the grandfather of them all. Everybody paid homage to him every now and then, dropping in there, and people like Parker Tyler, the critic, just a whole group of people. When you met one or saw the films one, you learned about something else that was going on. But you didn't have to do a lot of research or asking around. They knew each other. They were all at the door waiting to get in, so to speak, as far as success in art was concerned. So they were delighted to do things like travel to Pittsburgh for the cost of the bus ticket to speak. And I think Maya in particular enjoyed the audiences that we had here. They're pretty different from New York audiences. But Joseph would not have left New York, and Joseph couldn't have spoken to a group, I don't think, if life had become very short.
So let's look at the two. We'll show the two Maya Deren films together. The shorter of the two first, Studying Choreography for Cameras, 1945, and then the longer of the two, which was actually made a year earlier at Land, will be the second, the Deren film. This is, of course, a fairly arbitrary selection out of a larger number of the Deren films. To get the projection's attention. Any questions on these? I'm particularly intrigued by these because you knew Maya Deren.
Maya was much more articulate about her films. Maya was a great talker, and So I almost feel obliged to return these films if she can say what she is not here to say, to give something of a cue for looking at films. The first one is almost self-explaining in how she saw the use of the camera. She had traveled with the Catherine Dunham Dance Company for a year or so before she got into making her first film, which was Measures of the Afternoon. And one of the things that bothered her about dance films was the total inadequacy of the camera. You know, should it sit in the audience and film the dance from one seat? Should it go up above, a la Hollywood in the 30s, and look down and see all the patterns on the stage? That wasn't the way the dance was meant to be seen, etc., etc., all the variations, close up. And she decided to try to make a film in which the camera would become part of the dance, where a dancer could take one step and be from the chorus to the palace floor or whatever, and to use the film, the camera, as part of the movement, so that when Callie Beatty, who incidentally was one of the Catherine Dunham dancers, begins to spin, he does a very slow spin, and it's mechanically speeded up, proving that the camera can do it more accurately than the dancer, I guess. But I'm sure she didn't consider that more than a kind of experimental film, almost a demonstration of how the camera might be used. And the second film, she would never quite admit was autobiographical, but once you know that her name was Eleonora, and she changed it to Maya because of a very complicated whole mystical reasoning. It has to do with she is of the water. Okay, we have her, that was, she was the star of this film, being born out of the water with the waves running backward to skew her up on the shore. I think it's fairly obvious that this is an autobiographical film. And her pursuit of the little chess figure, the formal thing that is maybe her art. Also, as she walks along, as she climbs out of her birthplace there and into society, I've always thought it was kind of interesting that along that road, the guy she finally starts really being interested in and chasing after is her husband, Alexander Bennett. And then, of course, it changes once she has him in the house. There's so much. One couldn't have said this sort of thing. I mean, you wouldn't be allowed to laugh at anything that Maya did, even though in everything except her own, she had a really great sense of humor. But I'm sure that there is much that is just really funny about her in here, and that in some other situation she could have missed her. But I'm sure that her use of her friends, and incidentally that dinner party is quite a roster of interesting people in New York, people that she was walking along with. I've forgotten who the first one is, a poet, but then it switches to Parker Tyrus, and film critic is the second one, and then to John Cage, who still is quite recognized, and hasn't changed that much over the years. And then her husband, who she follows from the house. And the guy that turns up in bed is an art dealer, his name is forgotten. But then we get into all those fine people who do bad things to the chess and who are cheating. But she comes through and ends up in it and apparently finds herself at the end. That's what I think is really fairly clear about something like this. She wouldn't like anybody going down to that particular story. And of course it is crazy. And there are all sorts of subtleties in it. But as opposed to Cornell's film, which is strictly on a level of emotional understanding, Maya's often come out of being filmed almost as stories.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for coming here this evening and sharing your films and your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you.